All right. Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? Do we have volume on this? Can you crank the volume up a little bit? Or I'll shout. Thank you. Welcome to the Candidate Forum for California Assembly District 2. Tonight's forum is sponsored by Mendocino Women's Political Coalition, AAUW, and the Northern California Youth Policy Coalition. My name is Christine Rodriguez, and I am tonight's moderator. Thank you to Juan Orozco for broadcasting this forum via Zoom tonight. And the recording of tonight's forum will be available on the MWPC YouTube channel later. First, I will invite Lois Lockhart to do a land acknowledgement.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here with everyone. I'm reading the land acknowledgement and representing a Mendocino Women's Political Coalition of Mendocino County. The Mendocino Women's Political Coalition wishes to honor the homeland of the First Nations people of Mendocino County. There are 11 tribal communities, 10 tribes are federally recognized, 1 is not. The MWPC acknowledges that the land where we live, work, and enjoy is the unceded territory of the First Nations tribal people since time began. Mendocino Women's Political Coalition wants to offer recognition and respect to counter the doctrine of discovery with the true story of the original tribal people who are here, and to support the reconciliation of a government-to-government relationship of these sovereign nations. We are surrounded by their traditional ancestral territory, and we must strive to understand the spiritual knowledge First Nations people carry. Their strong cultural values have enabled First Nations resiliency to survive. And I am Redwood Flower, youngest daughter of ceremonial chief Lumkea of the Sherwood Valley Band of Pomo tribal people. Thank you.
And before we get started with the forum, I invite County Supervisor Mulhoran to spend 3 minutes to talk about Measure R.
Thank you. Thank you. The AVA program, also known as the Abandoned Vehicle Abatement Program, started in Mendocino County in 1991. In 2012, the Board of Supervisors approved a resolution to place it on the ballot. In the last 10 years, there has been $1 million raised and has assisted in removing 1,235 abandoned vehicles from city streets and county roads. Abandoned vehicles cause blight, are dangerous and hazardous, and really the AVA program is something that Mendocino County has been able to successfully keep our neighborhoods safe and clean. So I'm just here to encourage you to vote yes on Measure R, and I'm happy to take any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you. So thanks to our candidates for Assembly District 2 for joining us today to share your views and plans for California and our district. We ask that all of you keep your communication devices turned off or stored. We plan to spend until around 8 p.m. tonight on this forum, and we can get started with introducing yourselves with 2-minute opening statements. I'll change up who starts on each question, but we'll start with Chris tonight.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for having this forum, and want to say thank you to everybody who's here, both in the audience and then also candidates. We've gotten to know each other quite a bit over the last couple of months. My name is Chris Rogers. I was born and raised in this district. I have been involved in public service since I was 18, starting with Congresswoman Lynn Woolsey when she helped represent Sonoma County and Mendocino County. And I finished up as senior staff to Senator Mike McGuire. Worked with Mike for 3 years, up and down the North Coast every single day, getting to know the people who live here, getting to know the issues, and really understanding what our community needs in order to be successful. We saw that one-size-fits-all approaches to public policy do not work on the North Coast, and being able to take our local voices over to Sacramento and translate it into delivering for the communities we served was what we did every single day. In 2016, I ran for the Santa Rosa City Council. I was not expected to win. A developer put in $300,000 trying to beat our campaign, and we knocked on 20,000 doors, talked to folks in our community, and won. I've been on the council now for 7 years. I've been through 4 wildfires, a pandemic, a drought, and a flood with my community. I've led the rebuild efforts of Coffee Park and Fountain Grove, where we lost 3,000 homes and dozens of lives. And I've worked very closely with my community to make sure that they had what they needed to be successful. I've been a regional and a national leader on climate issues. I serve on the National League of Cities Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Committee. I've been very proud to talk issues with folks over the last couple of months in particular, and been very proud of the campaign that we've built. We have more than 100 local elected officials supporting our campaign, 3 supervisors for Mendocino County, McGordy, Jurdy, as well as Haschek, Senator Mike McGuire, Congressman Mike Thompson, and then groups like the Sierra Club and our local Chamber of Commerce, who I've worked with to deliver for our community and will continue to do so in the Assembly. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I certainly want to lend my voice in saying thank you to our host who have brought us together and all of you that are joining us both in the room and on Zoom this evening. My name is Rusty Hicks. When I'm not a candidate for the 2nd Assembly District, I'm the chair of the California Democratic Party, organizing every single day to mobilize and engage 10 million California Democrats to improve the lives of 40 million Californians. My work has been fighting for working people. My work has been much sort of connected to the labor movement, supporting workers who were fighting for a voice on the job, supporting them in their communities, and ensuring that they had a voice at the ballot box. I'm proud to have served my country when called upon. I was a member of the United States Navy Reserve for 10 years and deployed to Afghanistan in 2012 and 2013. I'm incredibly proud of the work that I do in the classroom today as a classroom educator. My father was incarcerated when I was growing up. I met him for the first time when I was 11. I got the opportunity to go back 3 years later to that very same institution where I had met him and attend his high school GED graduation. Some 30 years later, I get the opportunity to teach incarcerated students up at Pelican Bay as an associate professor with College of the Redwoods. I think we all know that we have big challenges and big opportunities here on the North Coast. I think it's important that we have a leader, an elected official, an assembly member that comes to this role with working class values, that comes in a spirit of service, and has the skill set needed to best represent the North Coast. I'm proud to be supported by Assemblymember Jim Wood, Wesley Chesborough, and Patty Berg, who have represented this part of the state for quite some time, along with 40 local current and former elected officials, along with firefighters, teachers, nurses, and veterans. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ariel Kelly, and for the past year, I served as mayor of Healdsburg in Sonoma County. I'm a mom to 2 amazing kids and have been a land use attorney. I've worked both on the Planning Commission for Sonoma County, working on the local coastal plan, our general plan, and huge land use efforts. Also, the county's cannabis program and ensuring that we are able to expedite permits after wildfires and floods and major challenges that have impacted our community. In my work in Healdsburg, I launched a local nonprofit called Corazon, and we work with education programs from cradle to career, helping children and their parents end cycles of poverty for families, working with adults, helping them have access to everyday programs to help them learn English, get a GED, get job skills training, and help our youngest residents have the best start possible in life. In my work in Healdsburg, we've been able to reduce homelessness by over 60%. We've built more homes and have more homes in the pipeline right now than at any time in the last 20 years. We were able to build a housing shelter for our shelterless residents at a time when people said it was impossible. And we were able to do this work in partnership with our community, bringing voices to the table, diverse voices, people who'd felt left out of the process. We provided childcare and snacks, and lo and behold, parents were able to show up and participate in meaningful ways in our community. And those are the types of opportunities where you can give voice and offer a change of opportunity and access to people in the community who need it most. In this work, I've also been able to lead a national nonprofit giving small business grants to women and people of color up and down the West Coast, helping them navigate through the pandemic. We were able to distribute over $7 million of grants to help businesses stay open during the pandemic. I've been endorsed by the Sonoma County Sheriff, Mendocino County Sheriff, 3 supervisors from Sonoma County, local elected officials, Mayor of Ukiah, Ukiah Valley firefighters, and dozens of others. I'd be honored to have your support. Thank you.
My name's Greer. I'm the lone Republican in this race. And I think one of the reasons I'm involved in these forums is so I can get everybody's heart to beat a little bit faster. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to be here and to share with you some of the things that I believe in. I am a retired special education teacher. I taught for 20 years, day in, day out, with the students in special education. I'm currently a school board member of the Del Norte County Office of Education and also the Unified School District there. I am an elected member of the California Board of Education as Region 1 Director representing Mendocino, Humboldt, Del Norte, and Lake counties on the State School Board Association. I'm also an appointed member on the School Board Association's Legislative Committee to help go ahead and decide which legislation that we want to support. I've put on almost 8,000 miles on this campaign. This morning I was in Weaverville and Hayfork. In fact, last night I attended a school board meeting in Hayfork because that's what I do. I know education. I was a union president for CTA. I was over a 5-county area for CTA of 2,000 teachers. And also about 31 unions, and helped with the training, the conferences, and also some of the governance of CTA. I'm grateful to be here. I'm going to look for your support, and I'm hoping that we'll have some questions about small businesses, about community safety, and education. Got 15 more seconds. I'll tell you, I also, before I moved to Crescent City, I know about wildfires. I lived in Paradise at the time of the Camp Fire. I was a school board president. I stayed an extra year there because we lost everything to go ahead and rebuild the schools. Thank you for having me and ask for your support.
About 5 years ago, we were in the middle of a drought on the reservation, and as you all know, up and down the West Coast, and our communities were struggling and fighting over what little water was available. We worked with our state partners and our federal partners. We started working to build a consensus that our communities on the Klamath River would start working together. But it was a big task. We had folks from Del Norte and Humboldt, as well as Southern Oregon, over 100 separate entities trying to sit down and work together. And it didn't go so well. And we failed. We failed a lot over and over again, trying to come to any sort of resolution of how to work together. I tell you that story because this week, Secretary Holland announced a first of its kind MOU between all the parties in the Klamath Basin, as well as $72 million to help provide the needed resources for the agricultural community, for our tribes, for our governments, to be able to work together. It's one of the things that being a tribal leader, you have to do. We can't afford to sit back and work in our own bubble or work in our own jurisdiction. We have to work with our counterparts in the state and the federal government. We have to work with our counterparts in the counties across the board, both public and private. It's why we've been so successful in accomplishing what we've been able to accomplish to build a sustainable economy, to protect our environment, and work towards a solution for water resources that all of our communities so desperately depend on. to build a better future. Thank you all for coming, but most notably thank my kids and my wife for coming with me. I appreciate you, and thanks for being on the campaign trail. Much appreciated.
Half a gallon of rum for every vote. There was a time when that was acceptable. That was the system. In fact, some well-known names lost because they didn't participate. And we wisened up and realized that that's not what we want in democracy. But the problem didn't go away. It transformed into what I see as a cancer on democracy. It's money in politics. And I think it's our number one priority. And you look at the problems that we've had that end up on glossy flyers time and time again, every election cycle, they're not getting solved. They're not getting solved because we're not looking at where the money's coming from for those flyers and to put people in office. The booze, at least that was an exchange between locals. This system we have today, you have money coming from out of state, places like Texas, names like not Glenn McGordy donating, but Blue Shield donating. We need universal health care in California. It's long overdue. Do you think Blue Shield is donating to campaigns because they care about single payer health? Because they care about Mendocino County? I see it as us selling out our democracy, selling out our representation. And so that convinced me to stand up and run. A lot of the problems we have in Mendocino County and the North Coast are due to the resource extraction economy coming to the end. That's what built this place. It's not our future. And the state's perspective is local control. The people can fend for themselves. Special taxes, use their local property tax. That funding, do the math. It's not going to get us out of this predicament. That needs to shift to the state re-envisioning what the North Coast could be. Some of it is restoration jobs that pay better than resource extraction jobs, but it's also deciding that equity, that you don't want to cross that tipping point. If you lose your hospitals, you're not going to have an economy, you're not going to have a sustainable society on the North Coast.
Thank you. So now we're going to turn to questions that have been submitted by the community, members of the community, both in advance and by on index cards here tonight. First question is one we heard a lot about. What is your position regarding the Potter Valley project? More specifically, the future loss of the 100-year-old infrastructure that diverts water from the Eel to the Russian River. If/when the Potter Valley Dam project goes through, how do you propose to address the water shortages that will affect multiple cities and counties? Rusty, let's start with you.
Try pushing the button on them.
You have to be smarter than what you're working with, clearly. Thank you. Oh, well, first, I support bringing down the dams and restoring fragile ecosystems, bringing back fish populations that have been decimated for more than 100 years. Certainly, I recognize that the diversion that has taken place from the Eel River has been the lifeblood, has given life to a lot of agriculture interest and community interest along the Russian River and in Sonoma County and in many ways beyond. I believe that we do have the opportunity to find a way to have a project that is data-driven, research-backed, that helps restore those fragile ecosystems, that brings down those dams, restores those ecosystems, and ensures a thoughtful diversion that helps support those communities that have been relying upon that water for decades. The reality is that PG&E is walking away from that project because they can't make any money off of that project at this point. And the community has not had its voice as part of the outcome there for far too long. I recognize that there is not an easy, clear solution, but certainly ensuring that every interest is at the table to determine how best to move forward. That helps ensure that everybody gets at least some of what they need.
I want to echo, what Rusty shared. I think that we know that there's going to be diversions that will be maintained. There must be. Too much is riding on this moment to make sure we get it right. It's a generational opportunity to rectify some past harm to the fragile ecosystems that were referenced, but also we have to ensure that everybody's voice is a part of this process. And I know that there's a number of folks, especially in the agricultural community, who feel as though they have not had a voice or a seat at the table. So I want to ensure that as we move forward, that we really are fully embracing all communities that have a vested interest. I think the reality is we're going to have a different relationship with water in Mendocino and Sonoma County moving forward. I think the diversions will not be what they have been for the last number of decades. And I think we have community leaders and people who are very thoughtful and responsive being proactive about reducing water consumption, about transitioning to a more recycled water infrastructure system, looking at Ukiah's leadership, frankly, and what has happened with recycled water here, and transporting that idea to other parts of this region. I'll also share that we have new technology and new information now about what we can do to replenish the aquifer when water is plentiful. So you have cities in Sonoma County like Healdsburg and others who are advancing aquifer storage and recovery well projects, which will mean that when we have water in the winter, we're able to store it and replenish the aquifer so that we have it in the drier months to draw from. We also are going to be able to do more with less, because we're going to have to. And also, when you're charging people for using water that has historically been free, which is what the future looks like, people are going to be much more mindful of their use and consumption. And so while I know that this is going to be a difficult transition point for communities, I also feel like we have the opportunity to really get it right. And I think that we're in a moment where there is a lot of great opportunity and people at the table who are thoughtful and smart. And I have a lot of confidence in the leadership of the communities that are at the table to make this happen. Thanks.
We know that the Potter Valley project is going to go away. That's a done deal. I know that there's meetings have been held to get everybody involved on how we're going to solve it. As I look at it, I look at the state. The state is willing to spend $20 billion to go ahead and put a water tunnel under the Delta to destroy the Delta and send Northern California water down south. Maybe that $20 million should be spent up here in Northern California in this area so that we can get, have the money, the resources to go ahead if need to put a tunnel someplace to do whatever type of reform we need to do on Potter Valley for draining the water off, desalination plants. We need to look at these things. LAO has told us right now in their latest study between 20 to 30% cuts in your water supply. We think we're paying a lot for power right now. Water is going to cost us a lot more. It's going to go up. We need to develop storage somewhere, somehow. It might be on the ranches, the vineyards to have their own storage, but we need to go ahead and streamline that process so they can do that on their own property. These are some of the things that are going to have to take place. And it would really be nice if we had that $20 billion up here working on these projects here, instead of doing the best they can to continue to send Northern California water down to LA where they don't have the storage with it. And that's what I really think we need to do. Look at that storage. We've only had one dam built since 1986, okay, over there at Sonoma Lake. That's the last big one that was there. They're just doing site reservoir. We need to look other ways to store water when we do have it.
I believe in sustainable communities and I believe in sustainable economies. I think when we look at the Potter Valley project, we have to look at it holistically and understand that we're connected. Ukiah is as much a part of the community in Fort Bragg as any other one is. That our water connects all of us and that we need to bring a holistic approach to it. There are communities up and down the West Coast that depend on healthy abundant salmon runs. And there's communities here that depend on sustainable water for their livelihoods. I absolutely 100% understand the situation we're facing here in Mendocino because I've lived it out. I've been the lead negotiator for the Yurok tribe for water rights for over 5 years, facing this problem day in and day out. And I'll tell you what it's going to take. Well, I'll tell you what it's not going to take. It doesn't take good answers. It doesn't take a lot of flashy talking. It takes real people having real conversations about their neighbors. And it's one of the hardest things you could do is talk about your neighbors and understand where they're coming from. Understand that water is finite and an incredible resource that we all have to work together to ensure a sustainable economy and a sustainable community. It's one of the reasons I'm running for state assembly, because it's what I've done and what I've been successful at. And I think what we desperately need, not just here in Mendocino, but Sonoma, Humboldt, Del Norte, Trinity, and Siskiyou County as well. We need leaders who know how to bring people together.
All of the above. And I think it's a shame that the establishment has pitted ranchers, farmers, environmentalists, the fish themselves against each other. It's not a war about water. It's a re-questioning water policy. The policy we have today is who got to the water first. Well, I'll tell you, it wasn't me and it wasn't my ancestors. If you want to go to that model, let the tribes decide where the water should flow. We need to rethink that. And we need to do it because it's not about the property right. It's about ensuring everyone has drinking water. You know, the drought was terrifying when we were trying to find water trucks to shuttle water, knowing families didn't have water flowing. That problem with climate change will get worse. We're going to have these periods of severe drought and then ample rain. During ample rain, everybody lets off and thinks we don't need to deal with it. We're out of the drought. The drought will come back, and over time, those droughts are going to be more severe. So everything everyone has said, I think the real question is, how do we get the state's attention where we're such a small part of the state population? We've got one vote in the assembly for most of 5 counties. And I think it has to start with not just an ask. It's not a give us money. It's let's talk about what equity really means in the state and decide that first. Decide that everyone in the state of California deserves to have clean drinking water. And in places that we don't have it, it may cost a little bit more. That's the definition of equity. And today we see that word on a lot of state literature, but we don't see it exemplified. It's just, it's a word, it's not action. And so what everybody's saying here is right. It's been tried. I know some of the people who've been involved, and I see one sitting in the room. There's a lot of good people who've been involved in local government trying to fix this problem. Local government is not funded, doesn't have the resources, never will have the resources. This is a state infrastructure project. We need the state to show up.
Now, I really appreciate the comments that everybody has made. The answer is yes, and absolutely, we need to continue diversions and make sure that folks have the water that they need to rely on, both for the ecology and the economy of the area. But then also, as was hinted at a couple of times, there needs to be greater investments from the state in infrastructure, particularly sustainable infrastructure. Not just what does the future look like once Potter Valley's project moves forward, but really across the entire region, how do we better adapt to the changing environment that we're going to see from climate change? I agree with Mr. Greer. Before we build a tunnel for water to go from Northern California to Southern California, we need to make sure that we can get water from Mendocino out to Fort Bragg and other sorts of infrastructure that we need to be building here. One of the issues that I'm very aware of is the power dynamic difference that folks in Mendocino County really feel. That when we first negotiated agreements, Sonoma County was footing a lot of the bill, which meant that Sonoma County ended up getting a lot of what they wanted. And this is where the state needs to step in and help to fund projects so that you remove that power dynamic and you can deliver infrastructure that's more equitable for the entire community. There are communities that rely on this water diversion. It needs to continue. But we also need to make sure that we are investing in our local economies and our local fisheries so that folks have what they need for the fish population to succeed as well.
Thank you for that. Our next question is kind of a combination of two submitted questions on the topic of funding for education. And Ariel, we'll start with you. The first question is from our sponsor, the Northern California Youth Policy Coalition. And it's with the governor's most recent budget update. There was a 6% reduction in the budget from last year, and COLA is now at 0.76%, which is a large reduction from previous years. What is your plan to ensure that rural school districts across Northern California have the resources necessary to ensure quality education and access to resources? And then the second part is that school attendance is critical to student achievement. Much of the funding that schools receive is based on attendance rather than enrollment, which means that if attendance drops, the district has a reduction in funds. To increase attendance, schools have to fund the staff needed to address the attendance issues, which means they literally have to do more with less. Would you support legislation that funds schools based on enrollment versus attendance?
Well, let me start by saying, thank goodness that there are young people submitting questions, because of the dozen or so forums that we've had, this is the first question on education, I believe. And it's really problematic that we're not talking more about this issue. As a parent of school-age kids, I think this is the most important issue we should be talking about. And frankly, when you talk to business owners or adults in the community or people in healthcare, and we're talking about the careers of tomorrow and filling those jobs, making sure that we have a trained workforce and that our education system is prepared to meet the moment is really the most important thing that's impacting pretty much everything we talk about in the community. So with respect to education funding, I don't know if you guys know, but there's 70 school districts in Humboldt County. Some of those school districts have 6 kids. There's 40 school districts in Sonoma County. We have a lot of superintendents, a lot of required state plans, a lot of overhead and administration that's required to run 70 school districts and 40 school districts in our neighboring counties. There is a lot of work being done to ensure that the dollars we're spending on education are going to fund teachers and helping to support students in the role. I think we have a lot more work to do to advance ensuring that those dollars are being used to the highest and best use, and supporting teachers so that they can make a livable wage and survive in our communities. Because right now I know a lot of teachers are struggling to do just that. With respect to the funding formula, a lot of folks are not supportive of the idea of switching from an attendance model to an enrollment model, because we also have declining enrollment. And so it's not an easy one or the other. I think that we are smart enough to be able to look at a multitude of lenses to figure out how do we ensure that our schools have the resources they need, and maybe not necessarily having just one strict formula to do that. Attendance and truancy, we know, is a huge issue, and especially in early ages, it's not the kids skipping school, it's their parents struggling to get them there. And we should be approaching that from a level of understanding and how to support those families, as opposed to punishing them in school districts by not providing them funding.
An education question. As an educator, as a school board member, as a teacher, as a union president, I look at education and say, you know, we got kids that can't read. We've got kids that can't do math. Something's wrong. Something needs to change. One thing that needs to be done is to make sure that our counties and school districts are funded. If you look at the $68 billion deficit, the way they got it down is they deferred certain things. And one of those things that was deferred was school maintenance. Okay, so we don't get that. That's going to be delayed. As you look at the funding, I'm going to start first with the LCAP. It's interesting with the LCAP because, you know, they tell you have a COLA last year, you know, 8% COLA. Well, really, that 8% COLA only affects part of that funding. It doesn't affect the total budget that you have in the county or in the district. Do we need to take a look at it and see if we can adjust it? I think it needs to be tweaked a little bit. There is a big discussion on whether, you know, to change, you know, whether it's, you know, daily, you know, attendance or enrollment, because it makes a big difference. You get into big cities, if they do enrollment, I mean, already personally, my belief is that the waste in LA would fund most of the schools up here. That's my personal opinion, because the bigger there are, it doesn't make any difference. the bigger organization, the more you're going to have waste. I think we need to go ahead and change a couple things. And when you talk about teachers, we need to go ahead and get a reciprocal agreement with different states. So that if we have teachers that have credentials, they're able to come here and then not be able to say, hey, it's great, but guess what? In order for you to get the California credential, you're going to have to take a few more. And I also think we need to do it with some of the A to G requirements, take a look at those and concentrate more on the youth and what they want to do in their future.
Being a tribal leader is an amazing thing, and being the vice chair of the Yurok tribe has afforded me so much experience. Having a tax base and large gaming revenue isn't one of those two of those things that I'm afforded. But we still have kids. We still have schools. We still try to provide the best education we can for them. So I got to chuckle about what it would feel like to get a budget cut, because our budget's zero. That's where we start from, is zero. And we build from there. I think that's what I bring to the state assembly and to this race is nothing's been handed to me and nothing's been handed to the tribe. We've had to build everything that we have, including our approach towards education, working with Del Norte County to bring $30 million to Del Norte County education to ensure that our kids have the same access to education as everyone else. And this wasn't just for tribal kids. This is for everyone. We know, and we've learned through generations, truly our children are our future. And ensuring that only the wealthy kids have good educations doesn't work. It doesn't benefit your community. You can't separate kids out. You got to educate them and bring good education across the board. It's what we've done. It's what I'll continue to do. And if I'm elected to state assembly, we'll take that model that we've been so successful and bring it to the rest of the district, because I think it's what we have to do. We have to bring and look for models of success to bring to our communities where maybe they're not having as much success. And it is my plan if elected.
But this is the way we've always done it. Have you ever heard that? I mean, the way we've always done it, roll back the clock, and you have a nation that was a system designed for white land-owning men. And we put together that was wrong. But California still has an education model that's not about equity. It's about, does a child live in a wealthy community? Because if they do, that property tax is going to give them a better education. That's wrong. Structurally, that's wrong. At what point do we approach some of these structural problems in the state? I'll tell you, your representatives don't like showing up to local government and having somebody highlight the structural problem. What they want is something that they can solve, something that will generate a headline, a sound bite, find some money, a project, right? That looks good. These structural problems are hard to solve, but the conversation needs to start. We want all children to have the same opportunity to education. We want to look at the outcomes and accept in some places, it may cost more to give them that same opportunity. All Californians want this. If you ask Californians individually as a whole, they would say yes, they believe in equal opportunity to education. Somehow that message filtering through the political system in Sacramento keeps the status quo. I don't think it's what any of us want. So you want to send somebody to the assembly who is a team player, can collaborate, build relationships. You also want to send someone who will be a bit of a nightmare, because just smiling and going with the system isn't going to fix it. And just like we needed to recognize that it wasn't about white landowning men, it's not about affluent communities taking care of their children. It's about all of us taking care of all of the children.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to say I'm very proud to have the support from the Mendocino County Superintendent, Nicole Glenser, who's hiding in the back as she has, I think, 7 forums now here in Mendocino County. Yes, absolutely. I think that the state needs to recognize that funding education based on who attends versus who enrolls is backwards. We know that students get sick. We know that things come up with their parents. We know that when you have an atmospheric river and the road washes out, that schools shouldn't be penalized because people don't show up. We need to continue to make the investments that we've been making over the last 5 years, and it's been easier in good economic times. But the state moved from being in the top 40 per capita for spending for students to now being in the top 20. Still not where we need to be, but it's progress. And we know that education is the silver bullet for moving people into the middle class. It's why it's so important for us to have strong public schools at all levels. Very supportive of also putting back in counselors and mental health specialists in our schools. If you went to middle school starting in 2017 in Northern California, you have not had a normal year of school. You've had fires, you've had floods, you've had a pandemic. That all has crippled your ability to get a quality education and to then become a productive member of our state, whether it's local workforce or just even going on to higher education. We need to make sure that we are not just putting more dollars into schools, but making sure that that goes into the resources that help students, like mental health specialists, like school resources, nurses, as well as our teachers. We need to keep fighting for it.
I think first and foremost, whatever system we have to find a way to fully fund education. We have come a long way. We're middle of the pack today. We were at the back of the pack not too long ago, and we simply can't go back to where we were. Obviously, after the pandemic, as we come out of the pandemic, absenteeism amongst students is particularly high at historic levels, at least in recent memories. And certainly, at least from my own family, I've seen and know the impact of absenteeism and what that means. In fact, my father started not going to school when he was about 13, 14, dropped out when he was 15, and then spent the rest of his life trying to really recover from that, connected to a whole host of issues. But my guess is if he had been in school, it may have been a different outcome. And so certainly whether we do recognize that a one-size-fits-all solution does not work with regards to education funding, even if we got a rural community supplement in some form or fashion out of the state budget. But certainly first and foremost, I think we have to fully fund education some way, somehow. An issue that I'm particularly concerned about is the shortage of teachers in our schools. That we have fewer college students entering the education field. It is harder to attract and retain teachers. We have to find a way to do that. The biggest issue connected to that, frankly, seems to be housing. The fact that you can't find adequate housing for teachers. I'm certainly proud to have the support of the California Teachers Association, the California Federation of Teachers, and the School Employees Associations, because I think they know that I will stand up for education and a good public education for all kids.
Thank you. For our next question, we'll start with Mike, and this is about PG&E. I know, brace yourselves. PG&E has succeeded in getting several rate increase approvals by the California Public Utilities Commission, claiming these increases are necessary to improve wildfire safety measures and build out more infrastructure like new power lines. But PG&E also recently issued cash dividends to its shareholders. Do you believe PG&E is exploiting ratepayers and needs to be more carefully regulated? Would you advocate for making PG&E a publicly owned utility? Mike.
Yes, as a victim of PG&E, having lost my home in the Camp Fire and seeing some of the infrastructure that they don't take care of, I think it's interesting to see how the Democrats, since they control the government and they control the appointments to the committee, and how that committee that's been appointed by the Democrats say, oh, well, you know, PG&E wanted a 28% increase, but we're going to feel really good. We're only going to do a 13% increase for now. I think we need to do it. It would not bother me at all to see PG&E become a a public entity. But the biggest problem we've had is that we have not had the oversight. The government did not do their job, whether it's to force them to go and take care of their transmission lines, take care of their hydroelectric projects, because the money was having the politicians turn the other way. And who suffers the consequence? We do. I'm no different than any of you. As a retired teacher, every time my bill goes up, I feel the same thing. I have a, CalSTRS pension and so forth, and it's getting way too expensive. And it's because the state has neglected over the last 10 years, the Democrats, to take care of the infrastructure, to use the force that they have and the power they have to make sure that these companies go ahead and do their job. I do not believe that these companies like PG&E, those doing the windmills out on the ocean, we should not be subsidizing them, because we're building the things that they want. They get the money. They say, oh, we'll give you a few jobs. Those jobs disappear. Their equipment breaks down. And in the windmills, that means basically that there's going to be an earthquake out there. And so, yes, we need to go ahead and make it public.
The real sad part about what's happening with PG&E is it's designed to work exactly like it's working. The system is not broken. It's not. This is how it works. This is how the CPUC works. This is how corporations work. This is exactly what it's designed to do. There's nothing wrong with it. Or so you say if you believe in it. But this is what it is. Corporations have shareholders that they're responsible to. Shareholders invest, and they are entitled to a return on their investment. This is corporate America. It's exactly what we're supposed to be doing. It's exactly what we all buy into. It's how we all can fund our campaigns and keep this ball rolling over and over and over again. And it ain't PG&E. Met a lot of really fine people working for PG&E who have good hearts, who go out there and bust their ass every day to ensure that you have power in your home, who care about your families, who are out there working day in and day out. Good people. Unfortunately, the system isn't designed to ensure that the company, the corporation, is responsible to you, because they're not. They're not responsible to you. They're responsible to their shareholders. And that's the system that we approve. It's the system we vote for year after year. It's what we prop up. Do you want to have a conversation about privatizing utilities? Absolutely. 100%. Let's have a conversation about it. We can do that. It's not going to get past the legislature. It's too much money, too well funded. It's never going to get out of the House. Ain't going to get before the governor. And if it does, he ain't going to sign it. We got to work within the system that's built, fight against it. One or the other.
And to make matters worse, what's this utility tax about? This flat rate, you're going to pay what, $30 a month? You're not going to get anything more for it. Are your utility bills not high enough already? Where's this going? Maybe a better question is, who introduced the language? How did this, I mean, I can't blame Michael Greer. This state is run by Democrats. I'm a lifelong Democrat. How did this sail through? Nobody thought this is unjust. We actually have the chair of the California Democratic Party here. If we do rebuttals, maybe he can answer. But it worries me when I see $750,000 contributed from Sepra Energy to the California Democratic Party. And then we see that utility tax show up. Nobody wants to take credit for the language. Our representatives say, oops, I didn't know. I read the summary. And I didn't know that I was passing that. We'll have to do something about it. We've sold off our representation. And we're feeling it in 1,000 different ways. And this is just one more way that PG&E by design is set up to favor investor returns over protecting a community from being burnt to the ground.
Yeah, so now PG&E is the most expensive utility in the nation per kilowatt hour. And especially having gone through multiple wildfires in my community, we're always asking, what are we getting for that rate of return? And the answer is that we don't really know. PG&E is not required to disclose how much money they're putting into deferred maintenance or into their infrastructure, but we do know that they're paying out dividends to their shareholders again. About a year and a half ago, PG&E went to San Jose and said that they would prioritize their projects if they gave them $100 million. My community has spent $100 million recovering from the Tubbs fire, and it was a slap in the face to us, but we understand why PG&E is doing that. They're illiquid. They get reimbursed on the infrastructure investments that they make, but they don't have the upfront cash right now to be able to invest that in transformers and then turning on power and wait for that money to come in because they're a poorly run company. They pay their CEO $42 million a year. And that's not a reflection on the people who work for PG&E who keep the lights on and work really hard for us, but it is a reflection on the way that that system is set up and the way that the CPUC allows them to operate. About a year ago, the FERC, Federal Energy Regulator, approved a proposal from PG&E to spin off their energy generating assets into a separate company. It's a private company that will raise revenue for them to be able to invest in projects. It also happens to shield them from future liability for things like wildfire. That's coming before the CPUC this year, and I can pretty much guarantee they're going to approve it based on what we've seen from the CPUC. It's unconscionable that you would allow PG&E to continue to raise rates without telling rate payers what we're getting from that, and also continuing to advance legislation that lines your own pockets. After the Tubbs fire, I was the chair of the California League of Cities Energy and Environmental Quality Committee, and we led the efforts to kill a bill from PG&E that would have changed their liability standards so that they wouldn't be liable. We need to continue to fight PG&E.
When you put a profit motive at the center of a vital service, you ultimately don't get the best service because the ratepayers aren't who gets the attention. It's the shareholders. It's no different in energy as it is in healthcare. And I'm assuming we'll talk about healthcare at some point this evening. I think it was President Biden who actually said, capitalism without regulation is exploitation. And that's essentially what we have here. When PG&E's rates go up 127% over the course of 10 years, something is wrong with that picture. And therefore, I think it's incumbent upon, certainly we can have a conversation about ensuring that PG&E is a public utility and what that would mean for service and what that would mean for ratepayers. But I think the legislature has to step forward and ensure that they are fully utilizing their tools of oversight, partially to claw back some of the power away from the governor and the CPUC that has approved rate increase after rate increase after rate increase. The second is from the budgetary standpoint, ensuring that we are fully funding the regulatory infrastructure that is in place in agencies, whether it's on an environmental front or otherwise. And lastly is for an assembly member or a senator or a state elected to use the platform of their office, not just to fight inside of the state capitol, but also to fight in the community as well, to program with grassroots leaders on the ground that are working on this issue to ensure that communities know how they can in fact have a voice in this process. I think it's oversight, I think it's funding of regulation, and I think it's mobilization of a community.
Thanks. I think absolutely we have a situation where PG&E is exploiting our communities for the benefit of their shareholders. And we absolutely have a model that is working as designed. And there are victims of this model and its community up and down this region. We know with certainty that PG&E was and is aware of their lack of investment in infrastructure, and they knew that there were risks associated with that lack of upkeep, and that those risks have now killed people. They are responsible for the death and destruction of thousands of homes and individuals in our communities. And that is unacceptable that we continue to allow them to operate in this way and exploit our communities. We do have legislation that is in the process right now this year, before any of us will get to this seat, that is going to hopefully pull back on their ability to raise that rate across the board. And so we are seeing legislators for seemingly stepping up to the plate and doing what is just to ensure that we don't see those ridiculous increases where we're not getting more, but we're paying more. As the mayor of Healdsburg, a public power city, just like Ukiah, I'm proud that we've had amazing benefit of having a publicly owned utility, and would love to see that expand across the state and especially across this region. That said, I think that that's going to take a lot of political will and people who are ready to stand up to bullies. Bullies that control the state, bullies that control the legislature, and big business and a lot of money. And frankly, I think we all need to demand more from our elected officials and ask for more accountability. We have the CPUC that is supposed to be overseeing PG&E, and instead, they're in bed with one another. We do not see the type of accountability and oversight that's necessary, and that's what our legislature, yes, we need them to churn out bills, but we also need the legislature to provide oversight, and that's not what we're getting right now.
Thank you. And we have a request for a rebuttal from Frankie Myers.
Yeah, this problem didn't happen overnight. This didn't happen last year. I sit on the Redwood Coast Energy Authority because I care and I agree that energy should be localized. Chris, Rusty, y'all been this for a long time, right? And you have a laundry list of supporters that back you, that at any point in time, any of them could have stepped forward. Our Senator, the wonderful Mike McGuire himself, your position with the Democratic Party and the influence you have. I heard both your answers. And I just couldn't help think, why haven't you done it yet? You both been there. Page off of the Republican books here. We've been in charge. We've been in charge. We're the ones who have been turning all the knobs. And this is still the same problem that we're getting back to, one that we faced over and over again. And I'll tell you, if you elect the same person and you get the same results, don't be mad about anyone but yourself.
You're actually insane.
If I could, I just want to make sure I understand the question. So are you asking why, as a city council member who has led efforts to defeat PG&E sponsored legislation, I haven't done more while rebuilding my community that was burnt down by PG&E? I just want to make sure I'm clear what the question is.
So you were the lead staffer for Mike McGuire's office, correct?
I was a senior field rep, yes.
Senior field rep.
So we're not doing it back and forth.
Oh,
To
yes.
clarify the
Yeah.
question. Thanks. Krista, do you want to have a rebuttal?
No, I think it's self-evident. Thank you.
Did you want to rebuttal?
Yeah, I did. So I didn't hear the answer to a question that I posed to Mr. Hicks. I think the audience can connect the dots. Our party, California Democrats, takes $750,000 from utility. And then we see a utility tax. They didn't donate $750,000 just to be generous, right? They're expecting something. We see they got something. How do you explain that to the public when the public fears for their life that PG&E has an infrastructure that will start fires at any time? We're worried for the worker safety. And we see the CPUC is only an illusion of regulation. There's no real power there. What do you tell the people? Because they want to know, what's this $750,000 about? It must be transactional.
Mike, you'd like a rebuttal?
No, actually, I want to thank the Democrats for agreeing with the Republican.
Okay. All right.
And this is why we invite Mike to all the parties.
Okay, we're going to move on to our next question. So this is really your job interview question. Can you speak to your experience observing and or participating in state assembly sessions and business? What is your plan for achieving success in representing the needs of the often overlooked second district? And what special committees are you most interested in? And this time we will start with Frankie.
So it turns out the Native American Caucus in the State Assembly is the largest caucus there is. I've had very fortunate to have Assemblymember Ramos, leader of that caucus, endorse me and help put together a plan of how to effectively continue to push bills through. In my time as the vice chair, we've been able to enact several bills, working from outside in and sponsoring those and working through the hearing process, garnering support across the board. I said this earlier and I'll say it again. As a tribal leader, I don't have the option to work within my bubble. I don't have the option to simply work within my jurisdiction. I have to reach across the aisle and work with folks on the Republican Party, folks in Southern California, folks in the Eastern Sierra, because that's the position I'm in. Because we believe in holistic restoration, and we believe in bringing balance back to the world, and because that is the foundational belief of our system, working with everyone in California is simply what we do and what I have done, garnering support across the board to move initiatives forward, not just at the state level, but at the federal level as well. Working with the current administration and the previous administration, working with the governor's office, working with our county leaders. It's why I feel most qualified for this position, because as a tribal leader, this is what we do. I'm a leader of a sovereign nation equal to the state of California. Simply switching who signs my paychecks for the most part. But it's the work I've already done. It's the work I've already been committed to. And I'd like to do it for you.
I'm glad you asked. I will be working on campaign finance reform because until we get that right, nothing will work. We're seeing all of the manifestations of corporate America buying off our representation. And I've been outright asked the other candidates, send the money back. Blue Shield, send that money back. Vance, I don't know who Vance is. I've never seen him at any of our forums. He doesn't live in our district. I don't want Vance getting a favor. I want our representative to look out for the people who actually live here. And it's, why is this such a foreign concept? In some other civilized nations, what we do would be seen as bribery. You're a corporation, you send a check for $10,900 to somebody running for office. We know what that's about. What happens when that spreadsheet, you scroll and you scroll and you scroll, and it just keeps going, 10,900, 10,900, 10,900 from Los Angeles, Sacramento, Texas, right? That's what I'll be doing in Sacramento. I'll be making sure that our representation is not taking bribes.
No, I appreciate the question. I've worked on legislation in 14 different states, mostly on renewable energy finance. I worked for the legislature for over a decade, whether that was Congress working for Lynn Woolsey, working for the state assembly for a couple of assembly members, or working for the state senate with Senator Mike McGuire. Sorry, I haven't fixed every problem in my time as a staff member. But I've, from writing to passage and signed by the governor, have over 20 bills that I've worked on that are now law. I know the legislative process, and what I know is folks care about having their voice reflected in Sacramento, even when we disagree with one another. And I think this district, going from Santa Rosa all the way up to Oregon, having Del Norte, Trinity, Humboldt, Mendocino, Sonoma County in it, there's a lot of voices that just feel like they haven't been heard. It's not even that they don't get their way in Sacramento. They don't feel like Sacramento cares about their communities. They don't feel like anybody's taken the time to show up and ask them how a piece of legislation is going to impact them. I did spend 3 years as senior staff for Mike McGuire up and down the North Coast every single week with him, talking with folks in communities, whether it was Weaverville, whether it was Covelo or Crescent City or other places that feel forgotten, that feel like Sacramento does not care about them. And I've been able to listen to those folks and bring that voice to Sacramento when we're in these discussions. To answer your question about which committees I'd like to serve on, local government, environment, budget. Those are probably the three that my skill set lends itself to the most. I'd love to be able to say something great like appropriations, where most of the work happens, but being honest, being a freshman assembly member out of a group of 80, you got to do what you know. And for me, that's environmental policy, that's local government policy, that's housing policy.
So I've worked both inside the building and outside the building. I was a legislative aide in Sacramento for a short period of time in 2005, I believe it was. And then I was a district director working a district, so recognize how to represent folks who are working hard to make sure their voice is heard inside the building. Much of my work has been outside of the Capitol, certainly understanding the process and how you get something done, but organizing, engaging, and mobilizing communities to ensure that their voice is, in fact, heard inside the building. I think what it takes to be an effective member is certainly a understanding of the community that you're representing, but you're one person. The reality is that no one can know everything. And frankly, you don't even know what you don't know. And I think too oftentimes elected officials sort of forget that, whether they're in DC, in Sacramento, or any community across California. So I think the staff that you hire and the connection that they have to community is incredibly important. They are your representation to the community. And many times they may be the ones who engage with a community member maybe more than the member does. I also think the relationship and the organizing that a member does and their staff does in communities around a district, and especially one as diverse as the 2nd Assembly District. As far as committees, we just got finished talking about PG&E and the North Coast opportunity to be a leader when it comes to climate stewardship and ending our reliance on fossil fuels. And so, the Utilities Committee is a great opportunity. Natural resources, water, parks, and wildlife, I think, are connected to this district. Certainly, budget is an opportunity to bring some real resources back. And I believe that a freshman member can be the member of the Appropriations Committee in their first year to ensure that every single bill that comes through, meaning every member who's got to talk to you, has got to come through appropriations, and there's an opportunity to get the voice of rural communities heard in that process.
Well, I'm proud to be a part of a very historic moment in the California legislature. California is on the cusp of having gender parity in the legislature for the first time. And in the next 4 years, there is a slate of women who will be coming in to help make that moment possible for our state. Nevada was the first state to get there. And frankly, that's embarrassing. And I'm endorsed by the Democratic Legislative Women's Caucus, which means the women Democrats in Sacramento have come together and endorsed me, have said, we're sitting around this table and we have an empty chair sitting right here. We pulled it up to the table and we're excited for you to come and take a seat and join us. That to me speaks volumes. Those women have been so instrumental in helping open doors and educating me about bills that are currently in motion, 2-year bills that we may see when I join them in the legislature. And the opportunity to understand what is possible when you can build consensus and come together. I think a skill set that maybe is missing in a lot of folks who are in elected office. But how do you involve your colleagues? How do you build a majority? Because that's what you do. You're one of 80. You cannot do anything alone. So you have to take the skills you learned in kindergarten. Be nice, play well with others, share, be friendly. But seriously, you can't do anything alone, and you have to know how to build a team and be a part of a team. I'm endorsed by the Jewish Caucus, the Legislative Women's Caucus, the Cecilia Aguilar-Curry, the Assembly Majority Leader, has endorsed me. And in those conversations, I think being able to have relationships with other rural members, many rural members who are Republicans, who don't feel like they have a voice in the Democratic supermajority, and how do we ensure those rural communities are served as well? I think that's a critical partnership that's really missing, and something very unique about this seat that will, unfortunately for Mike, but most likely be held by a Democrat based on the voters in this district. And so I'm looking forward to being on education, natural resources, and local government. Those would be the committees of my choice. I have an MBA and have a background in finance, so would love to be on the budget committee, but know that as a freshman, you may not get what you want first time out.
Obviously, as a lone Republican, would I have a lot of say-so? I'll have the same say-so they do here. Things won't change. As I listen to what's going on here, say, this is what I'm going to do in Sacramento. The problem with that is find out what's going on here and take the concerns of you, the citizens, to Sacramento, and then come back and report. You're going to send your staff out? No, you should be out here doing it. The legislators, they leave. We hadn't seen Assemblyman Wood. He was in our district office one time in 10 years. Okay, he doesn't get up there. They need to come out here and talk to us, the people. What's our problem? It's just like the law, the small engine banning, okay? As of 2024, January, we can no longer get small engines, for chainsaws, lawnmowers, generators. They should get batteries. Okay, these are the things that have happened here. Yeah, get those batteries, but you know what? If you're out in the boondocks, out in the forest, your batteries go dead and you can't have a generator recharge them, you're out of the water. You're not going to be able to have that power in your house. These are the decisions that are being made in Sacramento without finding out what the people here really need and what they really want. We need to have a more direct representation, and we haven't had it from the Democrats in this area. It's time to change. We need to go ahead and make sure that we're able to go ahead and understand and put out there. Will I be able to swing votes? No, because it doesn't work that way right now. It doesn't matter what the Republicans put up. The Democrats shoot it down. They try to readjust Prop 47, so-called Safe School Act, right? Because of all the felonies that they went ahead and put down to misdemeanors. New bills were put forth to change that. Out of the water. Things need to change.
Thank you. So our next question, and we'll start with Ted. The cost of homeowners insurance has skyrocketed, and many people are receiving non-renewals. What are your ideas to help with this problem? And would you advocate for an affordable state-funded option for comprehensive coverage?
All right, well, the guy who has 2 chainsaws, 6 batteries, and a bottle of bar oil in his car so he can make it to this side of the county. It's a complex problem in that it overlaps between personal responsibility, government regulation, insurance companies run amok. When I was fire chief, I regularly got calls, insurance companies asking how many feet is it to the closest hydrant? And I'd have to tell them 5 miles, right? And it would be like, click. And the next one would call. People were shopping around for insurance and they couldn't get it. And it's the wrong question to ask. The right question is, how quick can you get 2,000 gallons there? And it's not, do you have 8 high volume, high pressure nozzles? Because you don't have the hydrants to back it. It's how many firefighters are going to show up on average? How well are they trained? Is the property maintained? Not the neighbors, because the homeowner doesn't have control of what the neighbors do. Regulate it so that it's based on the individual, and then you'll see personal responsibility. Somebody that can't get insurance who's told you need to clean up your property, they're going to get out and do that. And that fixes the problem for all of us, because you look at the code, it wasn't written to keep forest fires from taking homes. It was to stop fires at the house from spreading into the forest where it could take a whole neighborhood. So we have a lot of the building blocks here. It just needs a little bit of tuning. We need to not have NFPA and ISO folk with East Coast mentality telling us how to rate fire risk on North Coast. The state could fill in with a reasonable formula that actually represents risk, and everyone would win. Insurance would want to play here. We would see personal responsibility at work. And we wouldn't have fire districts buying tools that they actually don't need, just based on trying to chase an insurance rating.
Yeah, fire insurance has become a crisis, particularly on the North Coast. First, I support Adam Schiff's bill to have a federal program for fire insurance similar to flood insurance that would mitigate some of the, or diffuse some of the costs for us to be able to do so. I do think that we need more sophisticated modeling for insurance companies to be able to take into account community investments in vegetation management and home hardening. I actually think of home hardening very similar to herd immunity that we all learned about during the pandemic. During a wildfire, your home either becomes kindling that helps move the fire, or it becomes a preventative barrier that helps slow it down or stop it. We need to make sure that insurance is taking into account not just the individuals, but the communities who are making that level of investment. And the state needs to step in and help communities that also, particularly like Mendocino County, like Humboldt County, Del Norte, and Trinity, that have a lot of state and federally managed forests for vegetation management. It shouldn't just be on local government to be able to solve that problem. I'm supportive of looking at Ricardo Lara, the insurance commissioner's proposal to tie auto insurance to homeowners insurance. Auto insurance tends to make money in the state of California. Homeowners insurance with fire risk, it tends to be a little bit of a liability. So the theory is if you make folks take the risk, if they're going to make money off of us, that you get better coverage. But we do also need to continue to provide resources for local counties to make investments. We have self-help county designations for counties that are investing in their road transportation networks. We need to have something similar at the state level related to insurance, where counties and individuals can't be dropped if they are following prescribed programs, whether it's veg management or home hardening.
Well, I think this issue has not just an impact to individuals and individual communities, it has the potential to impact the California economy. The inability to transfer an asset, to buy and sell property as a result of an inability to get fire insurance is something that I think my hope is that the California legislature, state legislature, is going to fix this before we ever get there. I see no smiles on their faces, so of course we're going to be dealing with this for a long time. I think there's a twofold piece to this. One is California has to continue to address in more intense wildfires here in California. That ensures that we are spending significant resources towards community resiliency, ensuring that CAL FIRE is fully funded, ensuring that we are funding fuel reduction projects all across the state. With regards to fire insurance specifically, I do think we have to ensure that there is localized data that is looking at the circumstances on the ground and isn't being done by someone in a far off place. And before we require home hardening, try to regulate that piece of it, I do think we should try to incentivize homeowners and property owners to do that work. Certainly, if we can find a way to reduce the risk in any way possible, we should try to incentivize that before we absolutely require that.
I want to piggyback off of what Rusty just said, talking about incentives for homeowners. So after the Kincaid fire happened in Sonoma County, and we were working to help get people back into homes or moving into apartments or shelter because they had lost their homes, I remember sitting down with a family who had just lost their home, and they were uninsured because they got dropped after the 2017 fire, and just looking in their eyes and feeling like we had failed them, that they had nothing. They had literally lost everything but the clothes on their back and the pajamas that they fled in the middle of the night. And realizing that it was going to take leadership and commitment to fix this incredibly broken insurance system. We have insurance companies today. The insurance lobby in Sacramento is telling us we have to fix the model. The risk model that the state is forcing them to use isn't working, and they've come to the table with a proposal. They're not successful in helping to get that model implemented, but it's what I think actually will move the needle. If there are properties that are higher risk, people are going to have to pay more for insurance, but if you're able to do the home hardening work to reduce your risk, you're going to be able to pay less, just like we do with insurance for drivers. If you're a high risk driver, you're going to have to pay more than a low risk driver. And you can prove that you're able to get off that probation. Incentives for homeowners, absolutely. It is incredibly expensive to do the tree work, to do the creating defensible space around your home, tens of thousands of dollars, and most folks can't afford to do it. And so creating a program to bring those resources to community, it's actually something I've already done. We brought millions of dollars of grants to Sonoma County after the fires from the Center for Disaster Philanthropy and from PG&E settlement dollars to ensure that folks could have access to those free programs or low-cost programs to do the work we all want to do. Everyone wants to make our community safer. It's very expensive to do. And I think individuals, as well as fixing the insurance, the model is where it has to start.
Insurance. Thank you. I'm one of those that can't get insurance. I own a property still that my daughter lives in Magalia. I'm not able to insure it because of where it's at. It's a huge issue. And it's something that has been going on for a long time. And as Ariel said, the insurance company has been trying to take care of this, but the Democrat legislature won't let it happen. Follow the money. That's pretty much is what's happening. I'm going to agree with the Democrat here because that's absolutely true. I talked to a guy today up in Weaverville saying, hey, I've got a house I can't get insurance for. I talked to the real estate agent, he says, I'm losing all this business. And we talk about the California economy because they can't get their homes out of escrow because they don't have insurance. And then the Democrats came up with a great plan, which was the FAIR Plan, which was great for 90,000 people, but we have over 400,000 people on that FAIR Plan now. And if you have a home out here, it's going to cost up to $10,000 a year for your home insurance. And that's nothing that's inside. That's not liability. That's just the structure. And then the state goes ahead and gives us certain hardening requirements. He says, one of my biggest problems, it's going to cost me an extra $15,000 to put a sprinkler system in my kitchen. Okay, so these are the things that we have to take a look at. Homeowner insurance is ugly right now. It's that simple. But we need to do it in a better way. And I disagree with hooking it to the car insurance. I had an insurance license for 15 years. You put it together with the home insurance, they're going to use that car insurance. It's going to go up because they're going to fund the home insurance with the car insurance. So it's going to go up too with it. It's a complex problem. It's a devastating problem in our rural communities, more so in the cities because of that fire coverage.
Institutional racism is a funny thing. And it's funny because I think people assume that it means you're a racist if you're part of a system. But it doesn't. If you think about wildfire in California, you think about where the origins started from. When I was growing up, the Hoopa Valley Tribe, the Yurok Reservation, were known for a few things. One of them being, we had the highest per capita of arsons in the entire nation, across the board. More arsons than anyone ever, blowing everyone else away. And it's because we lit fires. We weren't afraid of them. We knew that fire is a part of the world, part of the ecosystem. Unfortunately, we didn't have representatives representing us. It's why representation matters. Because no one in Sacramento understood the importance of fire on the ground and how devastating it could be to communities if you didn't manage it. Now we see our neighbors get burnt up. People lose their lives because we didn't have representation. Because we didn't have anyone in Sacramento to speak for us. Fire insurance is hard to get. Absolutely. It's a clear path forward of how we could fix it. Absolutely. But as a tribal leader, I'm forced to go back to the teachings that we've had since time immemorial, which is looking at the root of the problem and how do we address it holistically. Now, we fought to ensure $20 million gets on the ground to bring fire back to our landscape, but we need more and we need better representation.
We have a rebuttal.
I'm gonna rebut myself. There is some culpability on local government. In the case of Mendocino, there was a time when all subdivisions were shut down in this county for years because a judge found our general plan was insufficient. If you read that case, it's fascinating. One of the proposals was divide the whole county into a grid of 1 acre parcels. I'm glad that's not what happened, but what we have isn't ideal either. What was missing is the state didn't show up to say, county, you don't have enough experience in land use. If you have rural sprawl, and you just put people across the entire landscape, you won't be able to protect against fire. You won't be able to provide ambulance service. When broadband comes along, you won't be able to provide it. We see in other areas, other states, we see urban boundaries. That's essentially what we needed in Mendocino County. It's really hard to backtrack now, but we need the state's cooperation on this. How do we head down a path where we start putting people in walkable towns where they're not going to get in a car, whether it's electric or gas? It's a huge carbon footprint. How do we get that development in walkable towns rather than just encouraging endless rural sprawl?
Thank you. You got a 1 minute well, yeah. Any other rebuttals? Okay, we'll go on to our next question. Do you have any ideas for addressing homelessness, substance abuse, and/or mental health issues that have not been tried before? And this time we'll start with Chris.
So not tried before is not the part of the answer that I'm going to be able to give. One of the things that we do as local government folks is talk to one another about shared issues and about solutions that are working. We, in particular, in Santa Rosa, when I got on the city council, we had a homeless rate almost 4 times the national average for cities of our size. And there were a number of factors for that. So we went looking for what was working in other jurisdictions because we know that the public's dollars are finite and that we needed to be responsible with the solutions we were putting forward. We did a multifaceted approach. It's called In Response. It is a mental health and substance abuse response to public safety calls. We've seen this in Mendocino County as well and in Humboldt County. That came from Oregon. That's not a new thing. It's just finding a solution that worked in other communities and crafting it so that it worked for our community as well. And it comes from an offshoot of the Housing First model that assumes, and I think rightfully so, that if we can get folks stabilized and get the resources that they need to be able to get out of homelessness, that long-term, that's a good investment for our communities. That we can, in fact, get folks off the streets by first and foremost making sure that they have access to the services that they need. And homelessness is not a monolith. It's not everybody who has substance abuse issues. It is folks who have medical bills that they're having a hard time paying. And crafting solutions that work for the individuals that are homeless in your own community has been something that we've been very supportive of. We've seen a 30% reduction of homelessness in Santa Rosa in my time on council. And that's because we've been trying solutions that we have seen elsewhere that have been supportive of folks, while also making sure that it was tailored to the needs of my individual community.
Yeah, the question of solutions that have not been tried before, I think lawmakers across the country have tried anything and everything creative and uncreative in order to try to address this challenge. And I certainly can fully appreciate a housing first, in many ways a shelter first concept that pairs substance abuse, behavioral health from the beginning with that shelter or with that housing. But I think there still is, even after the years that we have dealt with this challenge, there is still a stigma that comes with those that are unhoused. I think they're far too often they are seen as the other. And we forget, if not for the grace of God or a higher power, there go I. And I think, especially at a time when we have such a lack of housing stock in both quality and quantity, we are seeing young people and students, we are seeing families, we are seeing seniors pushed to the brink and ending up in their cars or ending up in the street. And so I think appreciating and reminding ourselves of the humanity of our friends and family that we are dealing with, I think is a critical part to this question. And I think oftentimes we get lost in the sort of policy solution and think about the dollars attached to that and don't think about the individual that is a part of our community. They are our neighbors, they are our family, they are our friends. And I think we have to remember that.
I just want to say, first and foremost, housing is a human right, and I believe that we all should have access to shelter and a dignified approach to shelter. There are a lot of solutions out there that we've seen modeled in a number of communities, and some that have worked and some that haven't. I can tell you that in my time in nonprofit work and on city council and as mayor of Healdsburg, sitting down and having face-to-face conversations with those experiencing homelessness, there has never been a conversation where I didn't learn so many new things about what people are experiencing, just being able to have that conversation and have an open heart and an open mind. And I think that when you can create an avenue, a container for those conversations to happen, for the people who are experiencing homelessness to actually tell their local government or their state government what they need, as opposed to a room full of people with shelter deciding what's best for folks. Your eyes will be opened in a whole new way, I guarantee it. When we opened our first ever shelter in my community, folks were scared. Folks who own businesses were scared. They said, if we do this, people are going to ruin my business. People are going to be doing drugs in their cars. There's going to be all these problems. So please don't build a shelter. We did it anyways, and we did it with their partnership. We brought them to the table. We had those conversations, and we've reduced homelessness by over 60%. We've been able to take a model where we took a police sworn officer position and turned it into a licensed clinical social worker who goes out in partnership with our police department and responds to those calls in a humane way. And I think having that model, which many cities in Mendocino County and communities are doing as well, having that model where you're meeting the crisis with the right set of tools, it's a multifaceted issue. We know not everyone is experiencing the same challenges, but we need to approach it with a multifaceted approach to solving it. And I think that the state is going to play a role in bringing those resources to our local communities like it has with the Home Key program. And I want to see the model that we've done expand across this region. And I think it's possible.
You know, there's no easy solution to homelessness. We've thrown billions and billions of dollars at it. It's going up 10% a year with most of those families because there's not affordable housing. And it's hard to get that affordable housing with all the restrictions and everything else to build that. I think as I look at it, it's fairly simple in the sense that we do have to help these people. We do need to take a look at different ways to do it. If we have a program that is working, we do need to model that, but we need to have it local. I do not believe in the Prop 1 should pass. I'm against Prop 1 because it's taking local money and putting it on the state level. Okay, they say, okay, we're going to build all these beds. We're going to put them in, who knows what it's going to be like. We have no clue when the state gets something. We don't know what's going to happen. We need to get that money local so that the local communities can do things like Ariel did in Healdsburg. I don't agree with all nonprofits because I think sometimes we have some bad nonprofits, but let's take a look at those nonprofits that are doing it because they're the ones that are furnishing most of that housing. Let's get those programs that are working and let's go ahead and do it, but keep it local. We need the money here because it's the local people, the local governments that know what needs to be done. It's no different with homelessness than it is with education. We need to keep things local. The more we turn to the state, the bigger bureaucracy you get, the less accountability. We need to be accountable where that money's going. What's it being used for? Whether it's for mental health or homelessness, where is it going? We have better control on the local level, not on the state level, because they don't even do audits.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Do you have any ideas for addressing homelessness, substance abuse, and/or mental health issues that have not been tried before?
We start with where we've come from. But we started implementing restorative justice as a part of our criminal justice system. We started implementing community policing, holistic housing, restoration economies, programs derived from individuals. You can't solve homelessness by itself. You can't solve the housing crisis by itself. You can't solve the mental health crisis that's affecting so many of our people in District 2. You can't solve them by themselves because they're not singular problems. None of them. You have to solve them holistically, which means you need a change in how we look at housing. We need to change how we look at the criminal justice system. We need to change how we look at policing. We need to change how we look at governing and what government's responsibility is to the individual. I think we've been successful in addressing some of these, but because we've addressed them all together, because we've designed different systems than what we currently use for most of California and most of this district, and we've been successful. I think a lot about mental health and how often the mental health crisis isn't addressed and how we think differently about people who are going through crisis. And we think it's a housing problem. We think it's a homelessness problem. We think it's a criminal justice problem. It's a policing problem. But we've been through them before, horrific ones, and we've come out the other side.
A few years ago, I was invited to a conference in Sacramento, and as soon as the mic came, I couldn't remember what it was about, and I won't ever be invited again. I wanted to talk about the homelessness, the 2-mile encampment outside Tent City, wondering how is it that the state's political center, our senators, our assembly members are walking past it every day like I walk past it, and nobody thinks maybe the people want us to clean this up. And there's two sides of it. One is it's inhumane. We shouldn't have people living and urinating on the sidewalk. The other is it's not really fair to everybody else. And it's not as if this is a problem where we have to invent a solution. We see solutions around the world. There was one day where I woke up in Copenhagen and flew back to a board meeting. It was a long morning. And I think Glenn McGordy and Mo Mulhern were really good sports about how fired up I was. But part of it was arriving back in San Francisco and seeing from the air the homeless tent cities. That was the first thing coming back. We've normalized this. It shouldn't be normal. On the substance abuse side, we need to get ahead of it. Instead of asking, how do we get enough treatment centers? We need to ask, why are people going down this path to begin with? Your county is in really bad shape. We're at the top with our neighboring counties. The North Coast, I would include Lake. We're the state's worst scenario. Why is it that people decide they want to get hooked on not the best drugs? Early childhood development, community enrichment, access to education, access to healthcare, a vibrant economy. The state needs to invest early rather than waiting until it's too late, where it's either specialty mental health or telling us we have to build a jail expansion that we can't afford. We don't want to incarcerate more people. I don't want to hear from another family member that their loved one is in solitary confinement in our county jail because there's nowhere else to go and it's been 6 months.
Thank you. So we don't have enough time for a full 2-minute responses, but I want to fit in one more question. So timekeepers, these are going to be 1-minute responses. We're fitting it in. So, and Rusty, we'll start with you. Do you support changing Jackson Demonstration State Forest from industrial logging to indigenous land management? And would you protect the Jackson Demonstration State Forest from logging by adding it to the Governor Newsom's 30 by 30 executive order to protect 30% of lands and waters by 2030.
Yes and yes. I mean, the fact that you, okay, I should stop now. The fact that you have the regulations around demonstration forests put in place in the 1940s and 50s, a lot has changed in the last 75 years. And therefore, it makes sense, in my mind, to revisit what those regulations look like and what an engagement with 50,000 acres, the largest in the state, really could look like. I was proud that I know the California Democratic Party has been talked about quite a bit this evening, but I was proud that the California Democratic Party actually put forward a position to support in ensuring that we created public land out of Jackson Demonstration Forest.
Yes, I think that looking at Indigenous land management practices and stewardship is something not just in Jackson, but across the state. Obviously, we've got a lot of work to do, especially in this region where we know so much of our land is state and federal forest. We really do need to approach it with a completely different mindset than what we've done. I think the extraction economy of historic years is very different than where we are today, understanding much more around historic stewardship practices and how to work in concert with the land. And I think that we have a lot of opportunity to partner with our tribes in this community, in this region. I think that's one of the greatest assets of the North Coast, is that we have so many tribal communities here and folks who really understand how to best steward this land. And I think we need to be mindful of that, open to the idea that what we've been doing isn't working, obviously, and to be more proactive about reaching out.
Thank you.
I don't think anybody on this panel up here is going to disagree with doing that. Simply because our management of forests now is not very good. Okay, I've worked with the tribes extensively as a school board member. I actually represent Klamath and the tribal lands there. And I didn't necessarily agree on the Klamath, but it's done. Now we need to do everything we can on the Klamath River to make sure it gets clean and it takes care of it. And so I'm really backing that now. Same thing with the forest. We know how they treat their land. Okay, we need to respect that. You know, I love the outdoors. That's one of the reasons I moved to Crescent City, is because I do it. I mean, I carry my fishing poles in my truck most times because I'm outdoors all the time. I do a lot of camping with it. And it's sad to see, you know, the management of the forest, the way it's taken care of. And I know that the tribal agencies will be able to go ahead and do a far better job than state government
Thank you.
and federal.
Assembly District 2 is full of irony. Jackson's demonstration forest, state forest, is the epicenter for the destruction of our forests throughout California. It's where the state perfected how to destroy a forest and create a plantation. Plantations that create perfect catastrophic wildfire. Catastrophic wildfire that destroys homes and communities that then need lumber to build new homes. And the cycle goes on and on and on. We burn ourselves down to burn ourselves down. This is not a new problem. This is not a new problem. It's one that our Indian people have seen play out over and over and over again. Every representative has done the same thing.
Thank you.
Of course I do. it was my county that supported me on asking the state for scientific review. Turned into scientific review and co-management. We didn't think it would go anywhere. I was surprised that we had a board of supervisors, all 5 said yes. I think if you go back 20 years, that may not have been the case. And the theory was, we don't need to be demonstrating what a clear cut does. We already know. We should be demonstrating what forest health could look like, what climate change through the forest could look like. How about just we like trees? But obviously the next step is to add the word recreation. And there's an economic tie-in. You look at Bend, Oregon, and what it's done to their economy while bringing people out into the forest. You show people that forest, they're going to want to conserve more forest, right? You have people in the city, which is most people in California. It's such a foreign concept. They may have visited it once. They may have seen it on a postcard. It's different to be out there, right? Silent, sitting, hearing the forest, feeling the forest. We need Jackson to be updated to include recreation as the highest use, along with climate mitigation.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I served for 2 years on the executive board for the Sierra Club Redwood chapter, which is the whole North Coast. Supported this project through them and have been very supportive of the 30 by 30 project as well.
Great. Okay, it is now time for your 2-minute closing statements. And Ariel, we'll start with you.
Well, I just want to thank everyone for sticking with us, and for those who had to leave who couldn't stick with us, I want to thank them too. I really think this is going to be an election that's quite important, and frankly, most voters don't even know there's an election coming up. So if you leave here tonight with any piece of parting wisdom, it's please tell your friends and neighbors, if they're able to vote, that they should, and hopefully they will. This election, this 4-month sprint that we're all on together, that really just came about at a time when no one knew that this seat was going to be coming open. And I'm really so proud of our community and the folks that are stepping forward who want to run for this seat. It's been an honor getting to know these gentlemen over the course of the last several months. In my work in Healdsburg and in Sonoma County, in the nonprofit sector, leading 2 large organizations, helping to uplift community and our most vulnerable residents. I think that there is so much opportunity in this state. We are the 4th largest economy in the world, but as many of you know, most of us don't feel that in our communities. A lot of people in our communities are saying it is getting harder and harder to live here, to survive here, to raise kids here. And what are we doing to change that? How can we ask our leaders to step up and do more? And we need people who are willing to say things that maybe are hard to hear, but the reality is we need change. We cannot maintain the status quo to continue forward. I'm very proud to be endorsed by local firefighters right here in Ukiah and in Sonoma County, teachers in my community, leaders from the nonprofit sector, health center leaders, our sheriff, Sonoma County supervisors, Mendocino County supervisors. There is a huge, huge opportunity to create change that I think we desperately need with leadership in this region. I would be honored to have your vote. I'm proud to have the support of over 800 individual donors who are supporting our campaign up and down the coast, and all of the endorsers I mentioned. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here.
As I come here today, as I looked around doing all this traveling that I do, I'm very grateful that you showed up, because as Ariel said, people are not aware of the election coming up. And it's important for you to go out and to encourage people, your neighbors, your friends, let them know whether they whether they vote for me or somebody else, preferably me. But it's really important that people use that right. Now, we know that California's economy is really high, right? But so is we have a 13% increase in crime. We pay the highest prices for power, highest prices for home insurance. We are at the top of having to pay highest prices for just about everything we do. Okay, and the problem is that we are not connecting. Sacramento has not connected with the people, with the everyday people that are paying the money. Our taxes are going up. Regulations on small businesses are going up. So they can't hire the youth to establish, additional workers. These things are happening. It's because of the failure of Sacramento. They failed in our infrastructure. They failed in our policies that are doing it because they're looking at the cities. They're looking at, what they can get out of it. They're not looking at us. I'm asking that you look what's going on. What's happening to California? Why are we paying these? It's because we've had the same people in charge that's always been. You can talk and you can talk and talk up here on this stand about, yes, we need change, but I guarantee you it won't happen. And it won't be it might be talked about a little bit, but it'll put off the side just like it has for the last 10 years. I'm here for change. And I ask for your support to help me and join me in that fight to have safer communities, our education, to help small businesses. I ask for your support. I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
We've seen success building economies. We've seen success protecting the environment. We've seen success in ensuring education, healthcare, providing for our members, providing for our elders. I've gone around this district as well. I now understand how rare that is and how exactly what you've heard is true. A lot of the district is suffering, is economically depressed, is having a hard time. I'm not running because of the problems. I'm running because of our solutions. I'm running because of our successes and what we've accomplished. I said it before, we don't have a huge revenue. We don't have a huge casino. We don't get taxes from the federal and the state government handed to us. We've built everything we've had. We've been successful doing it. We have a model that works. I know because I helped build it. A model that absolutely can comply here in Ukiah, Santa Rosa, over in Shelter Cove, up in Hayfork, because we've started with nothing. And when you start with nothing, you know it can work anywhere. That's why I'm running. I appreciate your support. Google us online. You can find the work we've done. You don't have to believe anything we say. Find out what we've done. It's all there. Our good work we've accomplished throughout. Look us each up. Go to my website, votefrankiemyers.com. There's a lot of good info there. But do some research. Dig in. Find out about us. Don't take our word for it. Thank you.
I've been probably having a better time than anyone in this race. Yeah, they know it's true. Unlike Ariel, she says she didn't know until the last minute. I actually had a little heads up. The party chair, Rusty Hicks, came to my house, took me out to lunch. It was this late September. And I wondered, is it a coup or is Jim really deciding to not run again? And so I had the heads up, and I feel like it's a little bit of an unfair advantage that we didn't all know what was to come. I want you to, as Frankie said, go home and Google, and also pull up the FPPC data. Look at where the money's coming from. It's the most, for the next generation in this county and on the North Coast, it is the most important thing you can do. Some of us took an oath to protect against enemies, foreign and domestic. Well, domestic, I see out of area special interests, big money interfering with a local election. I think that's an enemy domestically. We need to begin recognizing that what's wrong in this picture is we deserve representation. You get one person to represent most of 5 counties. That needs to be somebody who's struggled here with us, that knows our challenges. You could take another county supervisor from Mendocino and put them up here, and I would feel the exact same, that they're qualified the same as I am because they know what that struggle is. You have people calling you because you actually answer the phone. Call Ted's cell phone and he'll answer anytime. You call me at 3 in the morning. Some people do. Not my preferred time, but it happens. You can't do that with the state. And yet local government is given projects. It's hey, here's local control. You do it. You run the program. You run social services. But that's a way for the state to say, we couldn't figure out a way to fund it. We'll give it to local government. That structure, that relationship needs to change. What we care about is, are we able to deliver the services and infrastructure that the next generation will depend on? And I think today the answer is no. It needs to be, there needs to be a plan. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to thank you as well for sitting through. I decided to run for the state assembly because I felt like our district deserved a local voice that understood our issues, knew our people, and had delivered on the issues that matter the most to us: housing, homelessness, economic development, rural healthcare, protecting reproductive rights. These are the issues that I've worked on as a council member and as a community member. When you look at our endorsement lists, I'm very proud of the support that I have garnered. I hope you will go to my website, chrisrogersforassembly.com, because I'm not the candidate with the most money. I'm not the candidate with the most power. But if you look at the folks who are supporting me, Congressman Mike Thompson, Mike McGuire, our state senator, now the pro tem, the Sierra Club, those are endorsements from folks who have worked with me for more than a decade, who know how much I care about not just serving in local government, but serving this community. This is my home. It's where I was born. It's where I was raised. It's where my wife and I are starting our family. My wife's a local nurse who deals with homeless issues, who deals with access issues around healthcare. We see the impact that it has in our local community. My community was devastated in 2017, and I've spent every single day helping to rebuild it, something that I'm very proud of. And for me, the promise that I make to you and to the rest of the community, nobody's going to work harder. And how you know nobody is going to work harder is because I have a proven track record that goes back 15 years of working my tail off for the community that I serve. And I'm going to be the candidate that brings solutions to problems and the candidate that brings experience. I feel like I can step in day one and deliver for this community. And I agree with Ted. I've been accessible. My cell phone number is on everything. My wife also hates it when folks call me at 4 o'clock in the morning. But that's what it means to serve a community, to make sure that they feel like their voice mattered, that their needs are met, and that their representatives are listening to them and leading with heart. So thank you so much. I'd be proud to have your support.
Absolutely, as has already been said, thank you so much for attending this evening. For voters that are not Republican outside of District 1 here in Mendocino County, I want to make sure that you vote on the right ballot. I think the county registrar is not here this evening, but I just simply wanted to make sure to remind everyone. Yes, let's vote on that one. Yes. Let me just say, I would argue that in your next assembly member, you don't necessarily need someone who knows it all. You don't need the best policy expert. I would argue that you want an elected official that shows up with the right values, that shows up with working class values, that matches a working class district. An assembly member that shows up and listens and learns before they act. And lastly, that has an experience and a track record of delivering for the communities they've been a part of. I've been proud as a labor leader and organizer, as a veteran, as a classroom educator to do exactly that. I'm proud to be endorsed by Assemblymember Jim Wood, his predecessor, Wesley Chesbrough, and Patty Berg. I'm proud to be supported by 40 or so current and former local elected officials, those who have been supported by this community. But I think what I'm most proud of is to be supported by working people that keep these communities moving forward. And I'd be honored to have your vote. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've got a couple quick announcements. One, the recording of tonight's forum will be posted on the MWPC YouTube channel. Just search for MWPC. We invite everybody to join us for our annual Women's History Gala celebration on Sunday, March 3rd, 1 p.m. at the Space Theater. We've got flyers in the back. We hope to see you there. And to any MWPC members here tonight, remember to pick up your nomination ballot on the way out. And that wraps up tonight's forum. Thank you to tonight's candidates, to our volunteers and members of the audience, both those here in person tonight and those of you who are watching on video later. Thank you for staying informed and taking your vote seriously. Safe travels, everyone, and have a good night.